She dialed 911 on my horses for taking a swim. No kidding. Last Tuesday, my HOA neighbor caught my 2 Mustangs wading in our family pond and immediately lost her mind. "They're contaminating our water," she screamed into her phone. "Send every unit, arrest those animals." When the deputies finally showed up and glanced at my BLM registration papers, the look on their faces said it all. Over the next 48 hours, events spiraled so far off the rail that my lawyer begged me to wait 6 months before telling anyone. Well, that countdown is over, and trust me, you're not ready for what happened next. Real quick, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, because I need to hear if HOA Karens are this unhinged nationwide. It was the kind of absurd conflict you'd expect in a Hollywood satire, yet there I stood, cowboy hat in hand, waiting for Riverside County deputies to show up and stare at me like I'd personally invented chaos. You ever had that "did she really just do that" moment? Well, you're about to share mine. About me. I'm Jack Riley, former U.S. Forest Service fire lookout who swapped campfires for stables when the burn season cooled. After 3 years in the Bureau of Land Management's Wild Mustang program, I've wrestled more paperwork than any tax attorney: federal registration forms, inspections, training logs, every hoofprint meticulously tracked. In return, I got 2 of the sharpest, most spirited horses ever to roam public lands. Doors the bay with a white blaze that prances like he's auditioning for a canine musical, while Athena's a coal-black mare with more intuition than a bloodhound on a scent. Together, they turned my quiet Montana ranch into their personal playground. And let me tell you, watching them dive for aquatic relief in 98-degree heat feels like 2 miniature tsunamis crashing through your soul. I'd just settled onto the pond bank, enjoying that rare ranch life serenity, when Linda's HOA empire came stomping down my fence line in designer heels. Contrast her white pantsuit, fresh as new paint, with the dusty denim I'd worn since sunrise. One look at my sweat-ducking shirt, and she declared me a biohazard. My horses are registered healthy and strictly pond protocol compliant. I called across the boundary, voice calm as a preacher at dawn, but her panic turned every syllable into a weapon. She jabbed her phone skyward, barking orders at dispatch like a drill sergeant in search of scapegoats. I half expected marshals in hazmat suits given her hysterical claims of water contamination. Instead, I got Sheriff Colin Ward, the town's most patient man, rolling up with a grin that said, "This can't be real." Then flipping through my Federal, Sheriff Ward's reaction felt like a masterclass in understatement. He glanced at my BLM Mustang certificates, tipped his hat, and declared, "Ma'am, those are federal assets. You're meddling with U.S. property." It landed like a gavel, and in that moment Linda's fury froze into disbelief. There she was, armed with HOA bylaws and outrage, arguing with a man whose badge trumped every community rule in existence. It was the finest display of contrast I've ever witnessed, the righteous indignation of a suburban kingpin meeting the unflappable cool of frontier law. I could practically hear the moral, never confuse your local HOA charter with the Constitution of the United States. By dusk, I'd been warned to leave those horses alone or face federal charges, the same animals she'd accused of poisoning her lilies. I watched Thor and Athena wander the shallows, their manes dripping like mermaid crowns, blissfully unconcerned by human politics. As the sky turned purple, I realized this pond had always been more than water. It was my grandfather's legacy, my sanctuary, and now the epicenter of an epic HOA meltdown. The next 48 hours promised to outdo any Western thriller. Midnight surveillance, pesticide plots, and my lawyer's voice on speed dial pleading, "Wait 6 months before you tell anyone." Well, that moratorium ends now. In the episodes ahead, we'll uncover how a simple act of kindness for 2 wild Mustangs erupted into a federal fiasco, complete with poisoned water, poisoned pies, and a lesson in when to pick your battles and your swimming spots. Keep watching, because this story's only just begun. The next sign that things were about to get interesting was the sound of sirens slicing through Montana's afternoon stillness. 2 patrol cars skidding onto my dusty driveway like reluctant dancers at a barn wedding. Sheriff Colin Ward stepped out, tall as a pine tree and just as steady. While his partner hovered by the horse's trailer, looking every bit as confused as I was, Linda Caldwell, flushed and frantic, practically hopped up and down in her stilettos, her designer suit at odds with the gravel underfoot. I couldn't help but contrast her squeaky meltdown, like a barn door in a spring storm, with Ward's planted like anchors in a sea of chaos. He gave me a nod that said, "Not again, Riley," and a look that expressed equal parts exasperation and begrudging respect. If you think a ranch in rural Montana can't be the stage for high-stakes drama, buckle up. There's more to come. Ward approached Linda's squawking accusations with the patience of a saint and the tact of a diplomat. She jabbed her finger at Thor, grazing his flank, and ranted about toxins and public health hazards. "Ma'am," he said, voice even as a metronome, "you might want to step back." He glanced at the registry folder I held, my BLM-approved stables of paperwork, and flipped through it with a practiced flick of his wrist. His tone shifted from courteous to courtly as he recited chapter and verse of the Wild, Free-Roaming Horses and Burros Act, reminding Linda that hiding behind HOA bylaws in the face of federal law was like defending a deck of cards in a hurricane. As her jaw dropped, I realized that sometimes a well-organized folder can speak louder than 1,000 outraged tweets. But don't think the story ends with a folder flip. Stay tuned, because the real fireworks are just getting warmed up. Then came the reveal that sent Linda's blood pressure skyward. Thor and Athena weren't just any backyard ponies. They were federal assets, protected by the same law that kept national parks national. Sheriff Ward lowered his voice for dramatic effect. "These horses aren't just grazers. They're part of a U.S. conservation program. Mess with them, and you're looking at federal felonies in gingham." The look on Linda's face was priceless. Equal parts shock, outrage, and humility. The poor woman seemed to deflate like a punctured tire, yet she managed to muster one more shriek about contaminated water. Meanwhile, Thor flicked his tail as if to say, "Glad I'm not in your HOA rules book." If you thought horses and federal statutes made a strange bedfellow, trust me, this legal rodeo is only getting started. Hang in for the next twist. As Linda's fury simmered down to a toxic stew, I noticed her hands, red, raw, and stiff with recent burns, as though she'd been handling unfamiliar chemicals without a second thought. The smell of industrial solvents hung around her like a bad cologne, and I knew right then that her campaign against my pond ran deeper than petty HOA jealousies. Sheriff Ward gave me a discreet nod, one eyebrow arched, as if to say, "See what I mean?" He leaned in and issued his warning in a tone so low it rumbled like distant thunder. "Mr. Riley, leave the horses alone. Cross them again, and federal prison beckons." Linda's ivory facade flickered. One corner of her mouth twitched in a grimace of defiance. Burns, chemicals, federal agents. It all added up to a showdown primed for the history books. But wait. The last embers of this confrontation are about to flare into something even wilder. Linda stood stiff as a scarecrow in a hailstorm, her icy glare promising that this battle was far from over. "This isn't over, Mr. Riley," she spat, voice brittle as glass, "not by a long trot." With that, she swept back over her fence line, gowning us in her departing promise of revenge. Even Sheriff Ward shook his head in resignation as he climbed back into his patrol car, lights still pulsing off-beat like a shaken heart. I watched his taillights fade, then turned back to Thor and Athena, unaware yet of the war they'd become pawns in. Footprints in the soft earth glistened by the pond's edge, fresh as a midnight confession. That's when my gut told me the real story had only just begun. Stay close, because dawn will bring evidence I never saw coming and a war I can't afford to lose. The key takeaway here is simple but powerful. Know your rights and arm yourself with evidence. When Sheriff Ward calmly flipped through my BLM registration, his steady authority trumped Linda's panic every time. In real life, keeping meticulous records, your folder in the desk can turn the tables on even the loudest critics. And never ignore the small details, like those reddened fingertips. They often reveal the real story beneath the noise. In every conflict, the soundest strategy combines cool-headed preparation with a willingness to listen for what's not being said. If you've ever found yourself on the sharp end of someone else's overreach, hit like and drop a comment with your own HOA horror story, because sometimes the loudest voices don't hold the strongest truth. Remember, a well-organized folder and a calm mind can beat panic and prejudice every time. Stick around, because at first light, I spotted fresh footprints tracing back to the pond, proof that Linda's battle lines were drawn deeper than I ever imagined. In our next episode, I'll show you what those footprints revealed and how one simple clue can change everything. I'll never forget the moment my heart slammed against my ribs like a runaway freight train. It was 3 a.m., dead silence except for the pond's gentle lap against its banks, until I heard it splashing, irregular, too deliberate for fish or raccoons. I flipped on my flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness like a hot knife through butter, and froze. 2 dark shapes lurked by the water's edge, moving with the quiet precision of trained operatives on a covert mission. In that instant, my ranch felt less like open range and more like the backlot of a spy thriller playing out under the Milky Way. My pulse hammered in my ears, and I knew I couldn't just stumble back to bed and hope for the best. Stay with me, because I promise you this is only the opening act of a midnight showdown. By sunrise, I had called in my old friend Mark Benson, ex-prosecutor turned amateur tech wizard, to pilot a thermal drone over my property. As we huddled around the live feed, seeing 2 figures pour liquid from containers into the pond gave me chills colder than a Montana blizzard. Their forms glowed orange against the cooler ground, each movement fueling my disbelief. Someone was trying to poison my precious spring-fed water. Watching that footage felt like catching a cheating spouse red-hand, only in this case, the betrayal cut deeper. It was the very lifeblood of my ranch under siege. But don't blink, because once I saw that video, I realized I had to fight fire with fire. That afternoon, I transformed my ranch into a fortress of redundancy. 6 hidden trail cameras sprouted like sentries around the pond, each wired to cloud backups and powered by solar panels. If Hollywood taught me anything, it's that redundancy matters. Because hard drives fail, batteries die, and the most villainous schemes exploit a single weak link. I locked Thor and Athena in a separate paddock under bright floodlights, ensuring they'd be miles from harm when night descended again. Printing receipts for every camera purchase felt absurd, yet satisfying, like packing a parachute I hoped never to use. Keep watching, because this is where preparation meets inevitability. That same evening, Mark returned with lab equipment that made my kitchen look like a mad scientist's lair. We dipped test strips into the still water I'd scooped before installing cameras. A grim countdown later, the results lit up like a false alarm billboard. Pesticide. Industrial grade. Suddenly, my ranch felt more chemical plant than pastoral retreat. The contrast between my morning chore of brushing horse manes and this late-night laboratory session was so stark it made me chuckle, if you can call it that through gritted teeth. But that laughter masked a stone-cold resolve. They'd made a grave mistake targeting federal horses, and I wasn't about to let them get away with it. Stick around, because the remedy to this poisoning runs deeper than I ever imagined. I glanced at the clock. 2 days until the next full moon, and I knew in my bones they'd be back to finish the job. "We've got 48 hours, Mark said, eyes serious behind his safety goggles. He reminded me of a pit crew chief before the big race, precise, driven, unruffled by panic. 48 hours to bait the trap, analyze every data point, and ensure that when the villains struck again, we'd be waiting with evidence so airtight it could survive a courtroom hurricane. The ticking clock pressed against my consciousness like a judge ready to call time. Curious yet? Just wait until you hear how I laid that trap, and why the next move would change everything. As twilight fell on day 2, I walked the perimeter one last time, checking camera angles and sealing weak spots in the fence. The ranch smelled of fresh hay and looming confrontation, a juxtaposition as strange as velvet against stone. I paused at the pond, imagining the next infiltration. how they'd tiptoe in under cover of darkness, believing they'd outsmarted me. Little did they know that every splash, every footprint, was already recorded, time-stamped, and encrypted in multiple cloud servers. It was like watching villains walk into a lion's den, oblivious to their own roar announcing their arrival. In the next episode, I'll reveal exactly who showed up for the midnight rendezvous and why the outcome left even me speechless. Don't go anywhere. This ride is far from over. The lesson here is clear. Vigilance and redundancy win the day. Just as a spy novel needs multiple layers of security, real-life threats demand backup plans. 6 cameras, cloud uploads, printed permits, and eyes that never blink. By treating my ranch like a high-stakes operation, I turned hidden danger into documented proof. In every challenge, layering defenses and staying one step ahead transforms chaos into control. Vigilance isn't paranoia, it's protection. If you've ever turned a whisper in the night into your greatest alert, hit like and share your own stories of how redundancy saved the day. Stick around because next time, I'll reveal how a simple peace offering, an apple pie, became the most dangerous ingredient in this saga. You won't believe what unfolded when I took that first bite. So I almost laughed when I saw Linda Caldwell standing on my porch at twilight with an apple pie cradled like a peace offering. But nothing about her apology felt neighborly. She wore the same designer dress, stained at the hem by dusty gravel, and every step she took echoed against the old wood like a drumbeat of false goodwill. "Jack," she began, voice syrupy as that pie's sweet aroma wafting through the screen door. "I realize I overreacted about your horses in the pond. I baked this for you." Her smile was practiced, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and I sensed the transition from friendly neighbor to undercover saboteur quicker than a colt learns to bolt. I invited her in with cavalry politeness, careful to keep the pie on the counter and my guard firmly in place. "You'll want to stick around, because when a sorry comes wrapped in cinnamon and crust, you know the real story is about to unfold." As she set the pie down, I noticed the bandages on her fingers, fresh as morning dew on barbed wire, and caught a faint whiff of pesticide racing beneath the vanilla. My ranch nose isn't foolproof, but years among horses and hay has sharpened it sharper than barbed fence. "I burned myself pruning rose bushes," she lied, rubbing those reddened tips together like she expected sympathy. Meanwhile, my trail cameras were silently recording every second. Her clumsy deception, the chemical scent dancing in the warm air, and her icy glare when I questioned the smell. It was theatrical irony, a floral apology masking a toxic agenda. But Linda didn't know I'd caught her on tape, and that secret recording would be her undoing. Curious? Good. Because not every pie is what it seems, and the night still held one more twist. I cleared my throat and played the clip from my pocket recorder, Linda's voice, low and sly, asking if those horses harmed the neighborhood water, who would be responsible? Would liability fall on me or the HOA? Her question dripped with duplicity like molasses over rotten apples, and the look on her face when she heard herself was pure gold. She shot me a glare that could sink a ship. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. But the audio left no doubt. A trap had sprung without me breaking a sweat. It was proof that every word out of her mouth was strategically planted, just like the chemicals in my pond. I leaned forward with a smile as cool as autumn moonlight, reminding her that in my house, every conversation gets recorded. "You'll want to hang on, because the next move would come under the cover of darkness, and it wasn't going to be polite." Later that very night, I reviewed the thermal footage on my laptop. 2 figures skulking by the pond, containers in hand. Even Linda's pie apology couldn't delay the poisoner's next raid. They moved like shadows against the silver reflections, oblivious to the new cameras stealthily tucked behind reeds. I watched them pour another slug of toxin into the water, and I felt a mix of anger and grim satisfaction. This time, I had them in high-definition infrared. Then, remembering that pie on my counter, I chuckled. That pie was a Trojan horse frosting, I muttered to myself, picturing Linda handing over that dessert as a gift-wrapped grenade. Foiled once more, she proved that in her book, peace offerings come with an expiration date and a hidden payload. The best part? I had every frame saved, ready for playback at the HOA meeting she thinks she'll dominate. Stay with me, because next we're exposing her in front of the whole community, and she'll never see it coming. Here's the takeaway. Gratitude needs guardrails. A gift isn't always a gesture of goodwill. It can be a facade for betrayal. Just like I refused that pie, learn to pause, question, and protect your boundaries before accepting favors that seem too sweet. Trust your instincts, document every interaction, and remember that sometimes a smile is the sharpest weapon. Next up, it's time for Linda to face her own audience, the next HOA meeting, where she thinks she'll have the floor. But I'll be ready to reveal the real poison plot in full technicolor. Don't miss it, because vengeance, like a prairie wildfire, often sparks in the most unexpected places. When I stepped into the community center that evening, the air was thicker than a summer thunderstorm. Words flew between neighbors like wayward arrows. An urgent HOA notice had summoned everyone to discuss public safety concerns, which was HOA speak for Linda's about to unleash another tantrum. I half expected her to arrive in armor, but instead she swept in clutching her laptop like a general ready for battle. Chairs scraped as people hurried to sit, and I couldn't help but notice the collective tension humming beneath polite smiles. It was the calm before the storm, and everyone knew we were in for a spectacle. Stay tuned, because no one leaves these meetings unscathed. Linda kicked off the PowerPoint showdown with all the subtlety of a fireworks display. Slides flickered up, demonizing me as the ranch menace, complete with grainy video of Thor splashing in the pond and my silhouette pitching hay. The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath as she painted me as a villain threatening Riverside Meadows' water supply. I sat there, mouth ajar, the kind of speechless you only get when someone tries to paint your best friends as public enemies. Yet behind her hysteria, her bandaged fingers danced over the mouse with practiced animus, curious how a pie apology morphs into public defamation. Keep watching, because the real hero is just about to take the mic. Enter Sarah Harper, the board's unflappable vice president and the sort of person who treats rule books like gospel. She rose, swept Linda's slides off the screen with a single click, and unleashed a dossier of forged invoices and wire transfers, bank records showing thousands funneled from HOA funds into shell accounts. The impact was seismic, like dropping a barn door on a runaway tractor. Neighbors leaned forward, eyes ablaze with betrayal, as Sarah likened Linda's embezzlement to a wolf in sheep's clothing. In that moment, petty tyranny met its match, proving one spark of courage can light the whole barn. But this barn still needed an exterminator. Hang tight, because justice has its own backup plan. On cue, the back doors burst open and an FBI team swept in, led by Agent Maya Davis, whose presence felt like watching a shark get its own tooth pulled. Inevitable and merciless. Guns were holstered, badges flashed, and with crisp efficiency they approached Linda Caldwell. "Linda Caldwell!" Agent Davis intoned, handcuffs glinting under the fluorescent lights. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted agricultural terrorism." The hush that fell was holy, the sort of silence where even the squeak of a pen would echo. In seconds, the woman who once bore pies of poison was escorted out in cuffs, leaving a stunned community in her dust. Think that was the end? Think again. The deeper network still coils beneath our feet. As the doors closed behind Agent Davis, the room exhaled collectively, relief, triumph, exhaustion swirling like hay dust in sunlight. Yet, even in that victory, I felt the weight of unfinished business. Linda's network reaches beyond this meeting room, like snakes slithering through summer grass. We'd clipped one hoof, but the herd remained threatened until every last conspirator was unmasked. The lesson here? True unity can topple the fiercest bully, but vigilance never sleeps. And believe me, we aren't done stirring this hornet's nest. Next time, we'll tackle the shadows hiding beyond our fences. If you've ever stood up to a bully and felt the power of community rally behind you, hit like and share your own tale of unity overcoming deceit. Don't miss the next chapter, where we chase down those remaining snakes in the grass and ensure peace returns to the ranch once and for all. 6 months later, the ranch has settled into a peace so deep you can almost hear the earth exhale. Thor and Athena stand knee-deep in their favorite pond at sunrise, their manes glinting like burnished gold. Local celebrities now billed in the morning paper as federal horses who saved a community. The cicadas hum their summer symphony without a hint of past discord, and neighbors wave as they pass, no longer with suspicion, but with genuine smiles. It's a contrast sharper than a prairie sunset against storm clouds, proving that even the most scorched ground can bloom again. Stick around, because this calm has a story to teach every one of us. The first HOA meeting since the dust settled, we unanimously passed what everyone now calls the Riley Amendment. Article 1, Section A. No individual, board member, or neighbor shall interfere with any federally protected animal on private land. The gavel came down with such finality it felt like a church bell proclaiming redemption. This bylaw isn't just ink on paper. It's a covenant born from hard-won lessons, the kind you only learn when poison nearly claims your lifeblood. It's proof that communities can rewrite their own destiny, and you'll want to hear how this rule is already protecting farms and ranches beyond our county line. Then came the letter from Linda Morrison, mailed from her federal prison cell. Her handwriting trembled like leaves in a high-wind storm, but her words cut through the barbed wire gloom. I take full responsibility. I poisoned more than water. I poisoned trust. In those lines I heard the flicker of genuine remorse, a rare thing in a person who once weaponized apples and invoices. She spoke of therapy, atonement, and a grudging respect for the resilience of those I tried to destroy. It was both bitter and hopeful, a reminder that justice can start not just with handcuffs, but with an honest confession. Stay tuned, because even enemies can teach us our greatest strengths. Beyond our little corner of Montana, the ripple effect spread wide. Dozens of families who'd lost land to similar schemes are now reclaiming their homesteads. Courts are overturning fraudulent liens with the Riley precedent, cited in legal briefs. National news outlets are running features on wild horse conservation, painting Thor and Athena as emblematic of the untamed spirit our laws exist to protect. It's as though one rancher's fight has sparked a broader movement, proof that standing firm can empower others to rise. You're curious about how our local battle became a beacon for landowners coast to coast? You'll want to hear how those stories continue to unfold. If there's one moral shining through this saga, it's that records matter. That folder of paperwork in my desk didn't just save my horses, it saved a community. And when your herd senses danger, listen. Because instincts carved by evolution are sometimes the sharpest alarm system you'll ever own. A single authoritative voice, like Sheriff Ward's gavel or Agent Davis's badge, can drown out 1,000 squeaky HOA tyrants, but only if you give it the truth to speak. It's a lesson stamped in every invoice, every recorded conversation, every legal victory. Don't go anywhere, because even peace has its own vigilant heartbeat. Now it's your turn to gallop into the comments, share your Ocho horror or your hero story, and let's celebrate the underdogs who stood their ground. If you've ever had to defend your home from creeping tyranny, drop a line below. Remember, never mess with federal horses. As the sun dips below the ridge and paints the pond in shades of fire and gold, I lean against the fence and watch Thor and Athena wade through their favorite watering hole, the very place that tried to break us, now the symbol of our hard-won peace. Standing here, I feel the weight of every battle we fought, every forged signature, every poisoned splash, every pie of treachery, and I also feel the pride of knowing that courage, community, and unbreakable records carried the day. This story isn't just about horses and HOA drama. It's about how a single person's resolve can spark a wildfire of justice that lights up even the darkest corners. If there's one truth I hope you take with you, it's this: never underestimate the power of paperwork. That unassuming folder in my desk saved lives and livelihoods. And never ignore the alarms your herd sounds. They sense threats we humans often miss. Finally, remember that one steady, principled voice can silence 1,000 squeaky tyrants and restore harmony where chaos threatened to reign. Thank you for riding along on this journey with me. If you've found value in our tale, if the lessons of vigilance, community, and integrity resonate, please give this video a thumbs up and share your own HOA horror or hero stories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss our next adventure, because out here, peace may return like spring after a wildfire, but every season brings its own trials and triumphs. Until next time, keep your records straight, trust your instincts, and remember, you never mess with federal horses. I want to hear from you. What should we tackle next? Another wild HOA showdown, insider tips on defending your property, or a deep dive into rural survival stories? Drop your ideas in the comments below or head to the community tab to vote in our poll. Your feedback shapes every episode, so let me know what you'd love to see. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next on-demand story crafted just for you.